Before you read another word, listen carefully. Subscribe right now. This isn't about numbers, it's about survival. The truths you're about to face are buried on purpose, hidden beneath noise and distraction. By subscribing, you ensure you won't lose access to what they never wanted you to discover. Silencing rarely arrives with a shout. It comes disguised as omission, as edits in history, as the quiet disappearance of perspectives. By the time most people realize something has vanished, they've already adapted and call the loss normal. The first method is saturation. Overwhelm the senses with endless information until nothing sticks. News cycles bombard you, social feeds drown you, and constant updates leave you too exhausted to ask the real questions. But ask yourself, when was the last time you questioned why certain stories trend while others vanish in silence? Framing is another invisible weapon. Debates are constructed so that only the edges are argued, while the core of power is left untouched. If you only ever discuss the margins, the center remains invisible and untouchable. Visibility is manufactured. What gets highlighted feels urgent. What gets hidden seems irrelevant. They decide what you notice, and more importantly, what you never even think to notice. Have you ever caught yourself wondering, who decides what deserves the spotlight and what gets buried forever? Normalization follows. Repetition turns shock into habit, injustice into background noise. Outrage becomes fatigue, and fatigue becomes silence. The system doesn't need to censor if it can simply make you tired of caring. Institutions enforce civility as control. Endless committees, reviews, and polite processes create the illusion of listening while ensuring momentum dies. Bureaucracy doesn't resolve, it suffocates. Gatekeeping of expertise narrows voices. Without certain credentials, your truth is dismissed as unverified. Authority becomes a wall, not a doorway, ensuring only approved narratives survive. Attention itself is commodified. Outrage sells, but complexity doesn't. Platforms bury nuance because it doesn't drive clicks. Silence is profitable when it makes way for entertainment and distraction. Algorithms shape perception without your consent. They don't erase what you seek, they bury it beneath layers of noise. Silencing here isn't deletion, it's invisibility, a disappearance that looks natural. Have you noticed how often you scroll, and yet never stumble upon the voices that truly challenge power? Social shaming is weaponized. Step outside the script, and mobs enforce silence through ridicule and fear. People censor themselves not because of law, but because the social cost feels unbearable. Law, too, plays its role. Ambiguous regulations, lawsuits, and endless contracts discourage speech by making it expensive to defend. Fear of punishment silences before words are even spoken. Funding steers which truths are told. Research and journalism follow the money, and money rarely funds disruption. What doesn't serve interests dies in obscurity, never reaching public ears. Even insiders stay quiet. Careers, reputations, and relationships depend on silence. Many know truths that could shatter illusions but bury them to protect their own survival. Have you ever wondered what voices remain hidden because the cost of speaking is too high? Token dissent provides a false sense of freedom. A few critics are spotlighted, but their words are softened, edited, and contained. Dissent is tolerated only when it poses no real threat. Complexity becomes an excuse. Systems are painted as too intricate to change, too vast to challenge. Resignation replaces outrage, and silence becomes disguised as maturity. Distraction is the handmaiden of silence. While you are consumed with trivial controversies and endless entertainment, the real shifts of power occur unnoticed behind the curtain. Surveillance is normalized. Cameras, tracking, and data harvesting are framed as protection. Privacy concerns are mocked as paranoia, silencing even the instinct to resist. Consensus is twisted into conformity. If everyone agrees, questioning feels irrational. The pressure to belong replaces the courage to ask why everyone is silent in the first place. Do you feel that pressure sometimes? To keep quiet, just to avoid being the one who stands out? Voices aren't erased, they are drowned. Noise replaces clarity, confusion becomes the weapon, and silence is manufactured without the need for a single censor's hand. And yet, the most dangerous silence is the one you never notice. The silence inside yourself, when you stop asking questions, when you accept without resistance. That silence is the victory they seek. The perfect form of silencing is one you don't resist because you believe nothing has been taken from you. It works best when it feels voluntary, when silence masquerades as your own decision. The architecture of silence is layered: cultural, economic, technological, and psychological. Each strand by itself seems weak, but together they form a web that holds society in place without visible chains. Media landscapes play their part. Certain narratives dominate every screen while others vanish entirely. The more you consume, the less you notice what has been carefully left out. Ask yourself this: what's more dangerous, censorship that bans words, or censorship that makes you forget the words ever existed? Education molds silence from childhood. You are trained to memorize, not to question. Creativity is applauded only when it stays inside boundaries. Rebellion is punished long before it has a chance to bloom. Workplace hierarchies enforce speech codes. Careers depend on silence about exploitation, inefficiency, and corruption. Speaking up risks livelihood, so silence becomes not just wise, but necessary. Social pressure is relentless. Entire communities police what can and cannot be said. One wrong sentence, one unpopular opinion, and reputations are destroyed in hours. Have you ever swallowed your own truth, not because it was wrong, but because you feared the cost of saying it? Technology accelerates the process. Platforms decide who is amplified and who is buried. Visibility is power, and invisibility is erasure. Silencing today happens not in prisons, but in feeds. The illusion of choice keeps you docile. Thousands of channels, endless books, infinite scrolls, and yet the truly disruptive voices rarely surface. Choice becomes a labyrinth that leads nowhere new. Surveillance chills expression. When you know you're being watched, you edit yourself. The watchful eye doesn't need to punish, it only needs to remind you that punishment is possible. Even culture romanticizes silence. Phrases like "don't rock the boat" or "keep the peace" disguise obedience as wisdom. You are praised not for speaking truth, but for staying quiet. Ask yourself, how many times have you mistaken silence for strength, when in reality it was fear? Distraction is weaponized. The flood of entertainment, memes, and outrage ensures that deeper questions never receive attention. By the time curiosity sparks, it drowns in the next distraction. Language itself is manipulated. Words are twisted until they mean their opposite, ensuring that dissent is ridiculed as extremism, and silence is reframed as virtue. Isolation is another weapon. Those who break silence are made examples, cut off socially, painted as unstable. Their fate scares others back into conformity. Even laws that claim to protect speech often have hidden clauses. Loopholes ensure that uncomfortable voices can be silenced legally, making censorship appear justified. But the darkest silence is internal. When you internalize their values, you stop needing outside control. You silence yourself, not because you are forced, but because you've been trained to. Have you noticed that sometimes the loudest silence is in your own mind? The moment you stop questioning your reality, generations adapt to silence as normal. Each one grows up knowing less of what the last one forgot. Entire histories vanish this way, erased not by fire, but by neglect. The system thrives on this erosion. It doesn't need you to agree, only to forget, to adapt, to keep moving forward while the past fades into myth. But silence is never total. Cracks appear. Whispers survive. A question once asked cannot be unasked, and a truth once seen cannot be unseen. That is why they fight so hard to drown awareness in noise. Truth doesn't need to be shouted. It only needs to survive long enough to spread. Awareness is contagion. Ask yourself, if everyone around you stayed silent, would you have the courage to be the one who spoke? Resistance begins with noticing. Seeing the patterns of silence weakens their hold. Each question you ask reclaims a piece of your voice, a piece of your power. Every refusal to accept silence is a fracture in the system. Enough fractures, and even the strongest walls collapse. Silence is powerful, but it is fragile. And here is the choice you face. Remain silent or begin to ask. Begin to speak. Begin to reclaim what was taken. Silence feels safe, but it is the safety of a cage. The system survives only with your cooperation. The moment you resist, even with a question, even with a refusal, the machinery stutters. Control depends on your silence. So listen carefully. Subscribe to this channel right now. This is not about entertainment. It's about staying awake in a world that depends on your silence. Subscribing ensures that the truth keeps reaching you, no matter how deep the noise gets, because the silence they built around you is only as strong as your willingness to accept it. Break it. Speak. Resist. Start now.